When the BLM campaign kicked off in 2020, I warned that it would cause nothing but division, that it would set race relations back decades. Well, guess what happened? Racial tension is now worse than it's been in over 50 years, and it's still headed south. The radical left regard themselves as superior in compassion and morality, yet they also think that spreading hate and racism will somehow reduce hate and racism. The hypocrisy and lack of self-awareness is shocking. Some of us think that racism is bad, and that stoking up racial division is bad, but those who consider themselves our intellectual superiors seem to disagree. From the 1960s and the time of the great Martin Luther King, race relations have been improving, making rapid strides. Racist encounters were dwindling, and any traces of systemic racism vanished decades ago, no matter what activists say today. But all that progress has been destroyed, utterly undone by an activist left hell-bent on spreading racism and division. They've made the hatred of white people not just acceptable, but compulsory. The activist left has ensured that this racist loathing now underpins the entire education sector, and it saturates the media, arts, advertising sector, the corporate world, and sport. Honestly, what did they think the results of that were going to be? If you continually encourage one community to hate another on racial grounds, then it will have consequences. This principle shouldn't surprise them, because it's a view they repeatedly endorse themselves. Yet none are more guilty of this idiocy than they are. We can see their peculiar obsession in the black national anthem that was performed at the Super Bowl. Because there was no Hispanic anthem, no Asian anthem, no Jewish anthem, no Native American anthem. Just one group are given constant favouritism, and one other group are subjected to endless hate. The left have encouraged the black community to think of themselves as victims, and to despise white people for victimising them. They've distorted history and lied about the past in order to push this bigoted manifesto, inflating and demonising some incidents while burying and obscuring others. But of course, if you repeat a lie often enough and loudly enough, then many people will come to believe it. Incidents of racist attacks by blacks on whites are spiralling rapidly. The rhetoric of the left has not just resulted in division, but in violent assault and murder. And statistical evidence for this grows more alarming by the day. In a recent survey of black Americans, 47% could not bring themselves to say that it's okay to be white. Some 20 million black Americans have now been conditioned by the left to be that uncomfortable with white people. They've created this appalling division. Yet even evidence like this leaves them unmoved. When Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, noticed this rise in animosity, he was immediately cancelled. But none of the media outlets could bring themselves to comment on a racist hatred he was responding to. Yet we all know that if a survey showed that nearly half of white people thought it wasn't okay to be black, they would never shut up about it. And look, I'm not defending or agreeing with Adams' comments, but both sides need to be highlighted and critiqued here. Yet they never are. Gallup surveys bear out this decline too. Regular reports showed that about 70% of Americans, both black and white, consistently felt that relations between communities were good. Yet in 2013, that fraternity suddenly collapsed. Now just 33% of blacks believe that relations with white people are good. And what happened in 2013? Why, that's the year that BLM was founded. Now, maybe that's a coincidence, but it almost certainly isn't. BLM themselves would say they were founded because of this decline. But in the words of Mandy Rice Davis, they would say that, wouldn't they? Now, there's a flip side to this decline. If you pour relentless hatred on a particular community, then sections of that community will respond in kind. I warned that this would happen too, because developments like this are obvious. To everyone except the activist left, that is. If you spread hatred and division, you will just increase hatred and division. And so there's been a sharp rise in neo-fascistic white nationalist groups. The radical left decry this development, but they're the ones that have caused it. Antagonism towards white people is a message that is continually reinforced through all outlets. And Google is, of course, no exception. If you search for Asian people, then Google will give you what you want. And they'll do the same if you search for black people, or gay people, or Muslim people. But if you search for white people, then Google simply cannot bear to accede to your request. I'm showing you all of their search results here, right from the top, and the few hits that actually return images of white people are from articles moaning about white supremacy or denigrating every aspect of white people. Our society would never allow this relentless negativity of any other group, and rightly so. But with white people, they never allow anything but. And look, I don't want to be alarmist here. Most people go about their lives and ignore all this nonsense. But it's seeping into the fabric of our society, and a generation of impressionable, malleable, and uninformed youth are growing up totally saturated in these noxious ideas. This stuff has consequences. Racial division is getting bad now. But how much worse is it going to get? Of course, we've not just seen knee-jerk systemic hatred directed at white people, but the activist left have also moved swiftly to excuse and justify any levels of crime or rioting by black communities. That's always, naturally, cast as white people's fault. And this whole edifice is based on historical lies, forwarded by people who aren't historians. One black activist recently claimed that Europeans didn't know how to wash until black people, specifically the Moors, taught them how. Well, that interpretation kind of ignores the Romans, and also that contemporary images of the Moors depict them like this, which is a bit inconvenient for his theory. But it's not truth or reality that matters to these people. It's just their activism, their victimhood, their hate, and their lies. This is a disaster for society. It's spreading hate, division, and racism like wildfire. It's all going to get worse. And this step was completely pointless. Radicals saw a situation that had never been better, but they somehow decided that it had never been worse. They approached wounds which had virtually healed, and they ripped them open again, plunging us back into the Dark Ages. They preached a message of tolerance, anti-racism, compassion and truth, but they practiced intolerance, overt racism, hate and lies, and we are all beginning to pay the price, though the likelihood is that it's the black communities that will pay the greatest price. The people who unleashed unimaginable suffering and destruction in the 20th century learn nothing, and they're creating a new climate of chaos that's only just beginning to gain momentum. And we can see how that process works. They excuse rioting and violence by their peers, justifications that only encourage further destruction. They spread continual lies, even indoctrinating very young children with their distorted and racist worldview. And the result is a rising tide of hate that must eventually seek an outlet. Mark my words, the worst is yet to come.
But they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. And this is a movement, I'm telling you. They're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And everyone should take note of that on both levels, that they're not going to let up, and they should not. And we should not.
Illegitimate! This decision! Illegitimate! This decision! Illegitimate! Into the streets! 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 Into the streets!
When Americans of all backgrounds peacefully protest racism and police violence, he disparages them, yet eggs on heavily armed militias. They're stoking fears about Black and brown Americans, lying about how minorities will destroy the suburbs, whipping up violence and intimidation, and they're pinning it all on what's been an overwhelmingly peaceful movement for racial solidarity. It's true. Research backs it up. Only a tiny fraction of demonstrations have had any violence at all. So what the president is doing is once again patently false. It's morally wrong. And yes, it is racist.
This country was built on slavery, which means slaves built this country. Tilled this land from sea to sea to sea. First it was rice, tobacco, sugar cane. Then Whitney did his thing and cotton became king. And we were its soldiers, 4 million strong. Fighting for America's freedoms, even though we remained America's slaves. Built this country. The descendants of slaves continue to build it. Slaves built this country. And we, the descendants of slaves in America, have earned reparations for their suffering. And continue to earn reparations every moment we spend submerged in the systemic prejudice, racism, and white supremacy that America was founded with and still has not atoned for. Slaves built this country.
What are white people superior at?
What exactly are white people superior at?
They're real good at violence.
Violence.
Genocide. It's like stealing people's lives just because they feel like it.
If you are white and you know this is happening and you say nothing, then you're a killer too.
What exactly are white people superior at?
Insecurity, pretending,
Fear.
Being fearful of nothing.
Being ignorant.
Blame.
Letting their egos control their every move. Superior at being dicks.
What exactly are white people superior at?
Oppression. Gaslighting.
lack of empathy.
Intellectualizing oppression.
Did I say oppression?
What exactly are white people superior at?
Taking what's not there.
Taking shit.
Taking our ideas.
Copycatting.
Gentrification.
Appropriating things that do not belong to them.
Taking over other people's cultures and making you believe that they invented it.
Maybe they're thinking of it as repurposing. It's like recycle and repurpose.
As my grandma would say, them white folk, they'll take it if you don't copyright it.
They are very good at destruction of land, destruction of people, destruction of humanness.
Republican, whether you're Democrat, whether you're conservative, like white people are really good at upholding white supremacy.
How about claiming that, they are actually a whole separate race, when actually white DNA comes from the Black female?
So what exactly are white people superior at?
Honey, lying, stealing, and cheating.
Manipulation.
Withholding information.
Lying.
Telling lies.
Nice. And as with all crises, the real problems will start when the backlash begins. If you want to support this channel, please like and subscribe. And if you're interested in these topics, I've written 2 books which go into them in much greater detail. They're called The Tyranny of the Left, and they're available on the links below. Please do feel free to pick them up and let me know what you think. Thank you.